Oh, baby, it's time for the RotoWire Rundown. I am, of course, Keith Stewart from Read the Line, and I am joined by my esteemed partner in crime, the award-winning scribe, the senior golf editor over there at RotoWire, Mr. Len Hochberg. Len, it's a little late today, so you must be in great spirits that I didn't wake you up at the crack of dawn in order to do the rundown this Tuesday.
No, it's beautiful, beautiful day here in the LA area. Got some things done this morning, and I know you have been very, very busy already today.
Yes, so we were a little delayed today because I had to go into the city over into Manhattan. Times Square was hosting the 1 year out, and it was the captain's press conference for Bethpage Black and the 2025 Ryder Cup. The Americans versus the Europeans. So Captain Keegan Bradley was there, Luke Donald was there, and the PGA of America was there in all their flowing robes and pomp and circumstance. I guess the DP World Tour too. Um, all the officials were in play for those two gentlemen to basically ask a lot of questions about crowd control. So, looking at your hat right there, on a
Hmm.
scale of 1 to 10, right? We'll talk about this just for a second, and I'll give you some feedback on what I listened to. But if the media asked 15 questions, 10 of them were about crowd control, and I see your hat there. On a scale of 1 to 10, what do you think the crowd is going to be like next year in September for the Ryder Cup?
Well, first of all, I was not privy. I did not know what happened this morning at the news conference. So that's actually pretty stunning to me that maybe one question, but is that the thing that 10 of 15 questions are going to be about crowd control? Wow. Um, yeah, I guess crowds are pretty rowdy and people are getting rowdy in general more in life, it seems. So I could see it being uh, you know an issue, but not to the point that 10 questions out of 15 should be answered. But I'm sure there will be incidents. New York crowds, Northeast crowds seem to be able to really ramp it up with the best of them. So
Yeah.
I guess there'll be some incidents, but I never would have thought, well, this is going to be like a problem. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm completely off on that. Well, we shall see. And I don't know. What did Bradley and Luke Donald say?
They basically just deferred to the PGA of America that there would be systems in place in order to handle unruly fans, and that they hope that everyone cheers loudly and proudly, and that it's a big part of the event. Luke Donald was sure to say very eloquently that, we'll be prepared. And Keegan Bradley says, well, I hope we're prepared too, meaning that the home crowd brings it. So, in many ways, they were more just egging it on than anything else. A second common theme was that of live players, which
Hmm.
was succinctly answered by Keegan Bradley by saying, I could take the 12 best players, and that's what I'm going to do. Now, when they went down the road with Luke Donald, he had to say a lot of regulatory verbiage. So it was like, if the guys go through the proper steps and they haven't resigned from the DP World Tour, and the questions came in where it was, what about Rahm? What about Terrell? What about, and they went on. And then there was a couple questions about Sergio.
I did see
And
that. Yeah.
and
Okay.
Luke Donald had to say, well, Sergio's not currently a member of the DP World Tour, so that would have to happen first. And it was interesting where the questions were all about Sergio being a player, which I didn't think was very relevant. But so the second theme of the day was live players joining in the Ryder Cup proceedings.
So you were thinking Sergio as a vice captain.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't
Well,
think that he'd be that relevant to play.
interesting. When I heard that Sergio, they wanted to, rejoin the DP World Tour, I figured that they wanted him. It was about playing. Some guys even past their primes, they can, turn it up for 1 week, and in an event like this, I would think Sergio could bring it. And boy, maybe that's where the 10 questions about the rowdy crowds came from. If
Could
all
be.
directed at Sergio, but I don't know. Do you have to be a DP World member? Maybe I'm putting you on the spot here. To be a vice captain, do you have to be in those good graces just to be, on the staff?
Well, hey, you're spot on. The people were asking him about being a player. I just didn't know that was a relevant thing as far as Sergio's season on Live. Historically, golf fans just always live in the past. We
Hmm.
cannot let go of our heroes. Sergio's he is the same class as what Adam Scott and Justin Rose, right? They're all that right around 2000 when they came onto the scene. Um, you
Mid
know,
40s, yeah.
yeah, they're in their mid 40s. I'm hoping you could come up with 12 better players than him on the European side with some of these young stars that they have over there, like Ludwig or the like, or the Holgard brothers. And so I don't know. I just hadn't really considered Sergio to, I didn't think John Rahm really needed Sergio to be his partner, that sort of thing, the Spanish Armada 2.0 or whatever, or 3.0 at that point, whatever it might be. Um, but it was interesting because he just kept coming up. And then the third theme of the day was, Keegan, what are you going to do if you qualify? And, he was very proper about how he would answer the question. He said, you know what? Right now I'm not even thinking about playing on the team. Obviously, I'm in all the majors and I'm in all the signature events, so that'll help me gain points. But for the time being, I've been really focused on the playoffs and then the President's Cup. I'm glad all of that went well. So now I'm going to focus on, getting some vice captains. And of course, there were questions about Tiger. There were questions about who else might you kind of, select in order to be a part of this council that you're bringing to Long Island next year. You got to remember, right? Everyone thought that it was the disciples of Davis Love that they were going to keep going down the line, the PGA of America. So the Stewart Sinks and these guys, after Zach, after, that the lineage had been kind of lined up. And now this threw a big wrench in the works. And now Keegan's going to pick the guys that he wants. And he, not being part of the boys club over there, leaves him with some, with the Brant Snedekers of the world, guys that really speak their mind. And they've been, good on the tour for a long time and have been in these matches and are good fighters, much like Keegan himself. So a lot of questions about Keegan as a playing captain. You think he has any chance to do that?
Um, I guess an outside chance. I saw that it's still going to be an automatic 6, although he's
Yeah.
off to a good start because they take all of 2024. It seems like I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't take all of 2024 and then 2025 up until the BMW. I'd like to see a little more recency in the points and all that. So he's got to finish in the top 6. I would say that would be unlikely, maybe a 20% chance, maybe even less of that happening. So I guess that really won't happen. And then he said he wouldn't pick himself as a captain's pick.
He seemed to stick to that sentiment for sure, that, he's like, I'm not in the business of picking myself. And they kept pushing the point. And he said, well, you know what? Every vice captain that I'm going to choose is going to be well aware of the situation. I'm the
Does he pick Jim Furyk as sort of an homage for picking him for the although he ended up being on the team, the President's Cup team, but he originally was going to be an assistant captain on the President's Cup. Did he return the favor at all, or?
So Jim Furyk was one of the people mentioned along with Tiger. Would they be going with you to Bethpage as vice captains? And again, he said, I haven't thought about this since July, since I was picked. I've been in the playoffs. I won in the playoffs. I then won the President's Cup. So I think he's digging in now, and probably par for the course. Luke Donald is a returning captain. He's got all his ducks in a row and everything. And Keegan's like, at this point, flying by the seat of his pants. So we'll see how it goes. But we're 1 year out. They're making the media day of Manhattan. They're hitting balls in the harbor or in the Hudson River. They're doing all sorts of sports talk shows. And the PGA of America is having their moment, getting prepared for what will be golf's biggest spectacle, possibly of all time, but certainly for 2025. Bethpage back. There was the one question about, like, what would you do to change the golf course to make it harder, for the Europeans? And the both captains were like, does it need to be any harder? Like it's pretty hard on its own. They asked this was the one funny moment was when they were talking about Medina and the fact that Keegan played a couple matches against Luke in that Ryder Cup. And Luke had to say basically that, like, Keegan beat him both times. And so that was kind of fun for the U.S. side. But overall, it was a new day in New York for the next installment of the Ryder Cup. And speaking of new days, right? It's not often we see the PGA Tour start a brand new event at a brand new place, right? So this week, a lot of people, it's raising some eyebrows, creating some question marks. What is the Black Desert Championship? So Reader's Digest version. Break us in here, Len Hochberg. talk me through this a little bit. I guess we're going to Utah this week, you and I.
We are. And, it's very interesting. One of the first things that was interesting when I think of Utah, I think of the northern part of the state, Salt Lake City, and all of that, where most of the people are. This course is way down in the southwestern corner of Utah, right near Nevada and Arizona, right in that corner there. It's only about 130 miles from Las Vegas. So,
Yep.
which I found very interesting, but it is a brand new course. It's a Tom Weisskopf design. Apparently, the last course he designed
Yeah.
before passing in 20, it opened. He passed in 2022. Part of the course opened in 2022, and the rest in 2023. So you're right. Not only is it a new venture with the PGA Tour, but it is a brand new course. So that tells me that they found something that they think is spectacular, right? They usually like to let things marinate
Yeah.
for a while. And, I've only seen pictures, flyovers. It looks like it will be incredible on TV. I don't know how much Golf Channel will devote and how many cameras and all of that, but the vistas are going to be spectacular. And I think one of the interesting things is that it's on a built out of a lava field. And my
Yeah.
first thought of I'm thinking of flowing lava, but no, it's just sort of rock. There won't be people running for their lives or anything like that. But
We'll see.
yeah, yeah, we'll see.
We'll save the running for their lives until Bethpage Black next year,
Yeah.
So, Black Desert Resort, their championship course there, par 71, 7,300 yards. A couple things that caught my attention. Number one, we are playing at 3,000 feet above sea level. So if you remember, the BMW championship was about 7.5% of increased carry. We're about half that height. So, and we have dry air. So, the ball should be flying this week out there in the Southwest Utah desert. Um, Second thing, we have 132 rookies this week. It's not even like you could go back and say, oh, it's like some guy played in a college tournament here or whatever. This course is pretty much brand new. So we have 132 rookies this week, top 65 in ties, purse of about 7.5 million, right? But as a golf professional, the eternal equalizer when everyone is on a level playing field is always putting. It's the one thing that can translate to more places than any other thing. And that is good putters will always have an advantage on a golf course that no one knows. It always seems like the better putters always show up in major championships. Well, why? Because they only play those places once every, maybe once a career. Some of these guys, it's not Augusta National. Some of these places they rotate all the time. Look this past year at Pinehurst. How many guys had played there before as a pro? Very, very few had been there, right? So I really pay attention to the putting stats on weeks when we have 132 rookies starting at a brand new golf course. And then the third thing is that there's a little bit of length. Now, granted, with the elevation, there'll be less of it, but it seems like it's going to be a bomber's paradise, right? We're talking about 51 acres of fairway, which is about double what we normally see, you and I, on the superintendent's report. But not only that, but we've got these 5 par 4s over 480, and we've got 3 par 5s over 570. I think the guys that are really good at playing long par 4s and par 5s, meaning really good long iron players that are used to hitting shots in from over 200 yards accurately, have an advantage. So I'm going to go with the putters, I'm going to go with the bombers, and I'm going to go with the guys that play the 500 plus yard par 4s really well and play the par 5s really well. What kind of skills are you favoring as you build out your lineups?
Well, you did mention the elevation. That was really interesting because I've seen people do the math and they think the course will play in effect, under 7,000 yards for a par 71. So even though I think the Bombers will have an advantage, some of the fairways are going to be super wide and there doesn't seem to be all that much trouble even if you miss the fairway. I think that I think that this could bring a lot of guys who I would very often stay away from on long courses into the mix. I think that, and there could be a lot of carry out here. There's a lot of topography, a lot of undulations, and I think we'll see balls roll and things like that. It's interesting about the putter because you know this 1,000 times better than me, what you said, but it seemed to me that putters get an edge sometimes if they play a course 3, 4, 5 times, they seem to take away the knowledge better than the bad putters, and they
True.
can really take advantage. So I don't know. I've turned to some guys who aren't the best putters, and we'll get to the names in a moment, I guess, because I don't know if these guys who the best putters will have the advantage of all this history, 3, 4, 5 years of coming back. It's new to everybody.
Well, there's two parts to putting, Len, and this is why I say that. There is the actual physical stroke and controlling your delivery speed and your speed on the greens, but then there's also reading greens. Guys that are bad putters are generally not good at reading greens, right? Guys that are good putters read greens really well. So if you're all going to a brand new blank canvas and you have to use both skills, right, intensely, right, then the guys, the better putters are going to have a better chance to make more putts because they'll probably just read the greens better. Now, we will favorite the guys that are better putters on bent grass versus, let's say, Bermuda grass last week. But like those are the guys where I center my attention because those would be the type of guys that if you and I were playing at your home course out there in LA and we brought two tour players and one was a really good putter and one was a really bad putter, the good putter is going to have an advantage because he'll be able to read the greens really well and he'll be able to control his delivery speed much better than, let's say, I don't know, Keith Mitchell on the 72nd hole at Sanderson Farms. Just throwing a name out there. I don't know, randomly maybe. But you know what I'm saying there. It's like a lot of times we get caught up just thinking about the actual putting motion, but reading of the greens is really something that people don't get enough credit for being good at, and it also leads to you being a good putter.
And I guess that's where a great caddy can really help in that
Oh, sure.
regard.
Yeah, great. Yeah, they would also be an asset in that regard going into a rookie week for everyone. So if you start to think about this, the people in our world they love to have compelling arguments. So one of the ways that we do that is we always tend to look at comp courses. So I'm curious, with not having seen a championship played yet here at Black Desert Resort, what types of golf courses were you leaning on this week as comps or comparison courses for your handicapping and again building out your DFS lineups?
Well, what I'm going to say initially is going to sound ridiculous because I looked back to last week, and the course in Mississippi at Jackson has nothing to do with this course, the actual physical characteristics. But as I started to figure out what I think will do well here, there was some similar traits of being able to
Sure.
really bomb it off the tee without really having much peril if you miss, and going into some decent sized greens and having to make a lot of putts. So, if in that regard, I think that there are just, you know, hear me out on that, that there are similarities to the way to play the course as last week. I've read that maybe even TPC Scottsdale, where they play in Phoenix, has some similarities to this. And I think it's going to be very much like Vegas when they play in Vegas, a mountain desert course. So that sort of thing. But again, you are infinitely better at this than I am.
I think that you're spot on in all of those. I would just add a couple more. Certainly, yes. Next week, TPC Summerlin, where they play Shriners, fantastic. TPC Scottsdale, why? Well, they're both designed by Weiskopf. So, I mean, he's really good at risk reward type decision making. You see it all the time at the Waste Management. I think we're going to see a lot of that this week. I think that's what's going to make the golf course really entertaining to watch. The two other places I thought of, well, the one place I thought of immediately was last year. I remember what a big deal everyone was making about El Diamante Tigers Golf Course for the worldwide technology, which we'll see again in about a month's time in November. But the fairways were 50, 60 yards wide, and it was a birdie fest. And like who played well there would be the same type of person I would think would stand to do well here. Maybe somebody that's not as accurate, but super long with the driver. Another one is Vidanta Vallarta. That was another one where like Cam Champ pops up in my mind as somebody like this could be one of those places where with his advantage off the tee that all of a sudden, a lot of maybe his other issues don't come to the forefront as much. And you give that guy a 50-yard wide fairway, he's going to hit it, right? Like he's going to hit it further down there than anybody else, that's in the field. So I think that both the courses in Mexico on the PGA Tour are good comps, and I love the Weiskopf grab over at TPC Scottsdale for sure as well. I mean, Shriners, Amex, all of those fit. I mean, I think desert golf with wide fairways, birdie fest. That's where my head's at on comp courses.
I'm looking forward to seeing it. I think it's going to be look really fantastic on TV because it looks fantastic on video, and the weather is supposed to be perfect. A little hot,
Yeah.
but and I guess the wind could be blowing, but not really forecast to right now. But down in the desert, it could always blow.
Well, I tell you what, I'm with you. You kind of breezed over this earlier. You're like, how many cameras are the Golf Channel going to bring? I hope they bring a ton. I hope they bring the drones and everything else because I think this place, this lava field and the red rocks jetting out of the ground surrounding this, I think it's going to be really spectacular to watch. And I think the golf's going to be a lot of fun, which gets me to the point where people tune in for the names. So let's go down the DFS tree here. We'll start in the price ranges at that 10K land. I think last I checked, or if I remember correctly, there's 4 guys up in the 10,000. Some are some familiar names from last week that were down there at the bitter end. Are you bringing those guys back like Killer Keith and Bo, or are you going in another direction for the 10,000s? Len Hochberg, who do you like?
Keith Mitchell, he was really a good sport about the disaster that happened. I mean, I sort of I mean, he said he played well for 71 and a half holes. And, that tells me that, he's going to be in a good mindset for this week. He actually played well more than just last week. He played well. He's played well for a few weeks now,
Yeah.
or the last a few tournaments in a row. And he putted pretty well there. We know putting is his big issue because he is just fantastic tee to green. But he putted pretty well last week. And I think because he sort of made a joke about himself, I think he will come back this week with a good mindset. And I've talked very often with you about being a week late on somebody. Okay, maybe I'll be a week late on Keith Mitchell because he certainly looked good last week. But I do like him again this week based on that comment that I think he's going to forget about that. Kurt Kitayama is, Kurt Kitayama had an interesting year. He did not make the playoffs, but he missed very few cuts. He played very well during the season in terms of making cuts, but he didn't have high finishes, which speaks to not being a good putter, which is why I was probing you a moment ago about not having, maybe not having a disadvantage because the good putters will not have the course knowledge and the green knowledge of multiple years of playing here. So I do like Kurt Kitayama, certainly one of the better players in the field, 10,000 in a weak field.
All right, down to the 9Ks. 7 names we have to go through here. We have Eric Van Rooyen. I think he's the highest priced 9K guy, or he's up there near the top. He won that Worldwide Technology Championship last November, 27 under par on that golf course down in Cabo with the wide fairways and a birdie fest. And then it goes all the way down to Lucas Glover, where when it comes to ball striking, I mean, this guy's always right there. So the 9K offers you some a little bit of variability there. Where do you set your sights in the 9,000s?
I have seen a lot of Eric Van Rooyen this week, but I did not go there. And I have a couple other names, but Lucas Glover, very interesting. I heard him on the radio, on PGA Tour radio last week. I don't remember what show, and he missed the playoffs this year. And it's hard. You only top 70 now. But he acknowledged that he is now in his mid 40s and he's going to have to start doing things differently to compete with the younger guys. And he mentioned that he is going to make a full-blown commitment this offseason to fitness and to diet and to getting ready for next year. And we've already seen it because he's had 2 good tournaments in the fall, 13th at the Procore, 3rd last week. And speaking to needing to be a good putter this week, he was 15th last week in the Sanderson field in putting. So I do like Lucas Glover. He might be my favorite guy. If you were going to ask me who I think could win this tournament, just all things being equal, not prices, not odds or anything like that, I'm really very high on Lucas Glover this week. Fishburne, what's his name? Patrick Fishburne, part of the BYU posse. here
Yep.
this week. A lot of, he didn't have a good week last week, but he's had a good fall. And Ryan Fox kept busy in Europe after the playoffs, so he has been playing a lot. Came back last week, tied for 11th. His two best clubs, driver and putter, always a good combination for me.
Well, yeah. Hey, I was on Fishburne last week, and that was disappointing. But Fox, if you go back and look at that WMPO back in March of this year, Ryan Fox was really good. And we're talking about another Weisskopf design. Uh, 8Ks. Kevin Yu is in there. He just won, right? There's a couple other names in there as well. Len, who do you like in the 8,000s?
When you were talking about Cameron Champ just bombing it off the tee with little that could go wrong, it couldn't possibly miss the fairway. I was thinking of a guy I put in my article, and that's Michael Thorbjornsen, who also can hit it almost, if maybe as far. And and being a very young player, maybe not as structured as he will be as he gets a little older. Maybe he just likes to grip it and rip it. Well, this is a perfect opportunity this week. He played pretty well last week at the Sanderson, so he's keeping busy. Harry Hall, Vegas guy. Well, he's an Englishman, but he went to Nevada, Las Vegas, so he is familiar with these types of courses. Only 130 miles from Vegas, desert, mountain characteristics. Terrific putter, and
Yeah.
second on the tour in strokes gained around the green. Anytime, I don't know if strokes gained around the green is the one of the top characteristics I'm looking for this week, but whenever someone is so good at something, there's going to be able to take advantage of that in a golf tournament. And old reliable Andrew Novak, still only $8,100. I don't know why he hasn't moved up in this field. I think he's very fairly priced. Just a great tee to green guy.
Yeah, Harry Hall definitely catches my attention. When it comes to scoring, that guy can make birdies. Now, you put him on a tight golf course, and sometimes he might find himself a little bit of trouble. But this place being wide open and his ability to score at will almost with that putter and with his wedge game. You remember, you got two short drivable par fours, and you've got three par fives. So that gives you five scoring holes with a very, very like under 100-yard wedge shot, which Hall is just absolutely an expert at. 7K, couple names down here. I've got like Jacob Bridgman. I got Daniel Berger. I've got Alex Smalley. Some of these guys just came out of the woodwork last week at the Sanderson and they played well. Can we count on them for another week? So who do you like in the 7,000s, Len?
Jacob Bridgman is on my list. I have a few guys in here. Chandler Phillips, I've talked about him a few
Mhm.
times during the year, 28th on tour in birdie average, and way down at the bottom of the sevens, Austin Smotherman. He's not been
Oh,
on tour this year. He was he was a 126 to 150 guy. He's played only 12 tournaments this year, but he's made 11 cuts, both of them
huh.
in the fall, top 10 at the Pro Tour. He's got a lot of work to do to get into the top 125. He's about 160th, 165th now. But when he's gotten the opportunity to get into the PGA Tour events, which he hasn't had a lot of, he's backed it up and he's played pretty well. So let's see what he can do. He certainly has the impetus to really play, and he'll probably play every event that he can get into to try and get into that top 125.
All right, we'll go down to the basement, the 6,000s. One of the name I've got three names, two serious and one I just had to say. But the first one is Brandon Wu. Every year in Mexico Open, Brandon Wu seems like he finishes in the top five. Could this be a good fit for him? Or if we're looking for bombers, there's always Peter Quest, who just absolutely tears the cover off the ball. I think he's up there with Cam Champ and leading the tour in driving distance. And then the third one is St. George, Utah's very own, going for his 500th career PGA Tour sanctioned start at, I think, 65 years old. The one, the only J. Don Blake. Are you kidding me? Right? Who are you pulling out of the basement this week in the 6,000s there, Len?
The last thing we talked about last week, I said that I'm picking Tony Finau this week. So I was stunned to see that he was not playing in this tournament. Apparently, he has a commitment with his son in California. Sounds something sports, but I don't know that, but something with his son. So, and so I sort of joked in my article that they rolled out, they didn't have Finau, so they rolled out Jadon Blake. Oh my gosh. But yeah, he'll he's on the interview schedule along with some of the other Utah guys. So he'll get some camera time at least Thursday and Friday. But no, I'm not picking him. But it's a wonderful story to be able to play your 500th PGA Tour event anywhere, but in your home state of Utah. A couple of guys on my list. I'll just mention quickly in Carson Young and Ryo Hisatsune. Hisatsune, missed the playoffs, but is back. Will be back next year. He's like in the 80s or the 90s and in the point standing, so he'll keep his card for next year. But the guy I wanted to talk about is Sung Yul No. I guess he goes by SY No now. He is only $6,400. He has not been on tour. He's just a past champion. He's played on the Corn Ferry Tour this year, coming off a top 20 at the Corn Ferry Tour Championship. But what really caught my eye was that he's only 90-1 on the DK Sportsbook. And at 60, he's a better price than Carson Young and Ryo Hisatsune, who were $500 more on the DFS side of things, 6,900 for both of them to 64. So I saw an imbalance here, and it made me look into Sung Yul SY No. And I thought, okay, the sportsbook people, they're pretty smart people. They think a little bit more of no than maybe we should. But he's played only 7 tournaments this year. He made the cut in 5 of them. He's had a top 10. If you need somebody really cheap under 6,500, always give the people one guy. He's a guy who stood out for me, and that 90-1 sort of pushed me toward him, that they know something a little bit that he can at least get to the weekend.
Hey, viewers, now you know why we always call upon the one, the only Mr. Len Hochberg, because he comes up with, I can remember the first time you brought up Ryo Hisatsune. It was in the West Coast Swing back in February, and now you're looking at a guy that finished in the top of I think 85 of the FedEx Cup points. A really solid player and a guy that has never priced that much, but has people have used in a lot of lineups and they've had a lot of success with. There's no doubt about that. Just a quick aside, I mentioned St. George's is the nearest major town in Southwest Utah there to Black Desert Resort, right? So not only is Jadon Blake from Utah, but he's like from the nearest town to this resort to play in his 500th event. So I love to make fun of stuff like that when they wheel these people out in chairs, but at the same time, it is a wonderful story for a guy who spent his whole life on tour. And yes, I am sure there are some, hotshot Corn Ferry kid that could go out and beat Jadon Blake this week. But the fact of the matter is it's the Jadon Blakes of the world and those stories that definitely get people excited, in many ways locally in order to, to gain the crowds and also connect with the foundations and do all the nice charitable work that, of course, the tour does. So I'm sure Jadon Blake is involved in all of that as well. Now, over to my side, the betting world, a couple names for you as usual. First of whom you've already mentioned, and that is the young lad, number 1 on the PGA Tour University charts. That is Mr. Michael Thorbjornsen, right? Plus 4,500 today. I saw it yesterday. I wrote the article for the Monday odds drop for Golf Digest. He was plus 3,500. So people are running some bonuses on this kid because he is uber long. Tied 8th last week at the Sanderson, and last 3 events and the fall, the putter is popping. So here's a kid that if you give him 50-yard wide fairways, he's going to have a wedge in hand all day. I don't care if the hole is 500 yards long. He is going to have an advantage along with some of the other longer players. And he's obviously playing very well right now. And he's obviously putting very well right now. The kid's a stud. He went to Stanford. He's used to the West Coast. None of what's going on at this place is going to throw him for a loop. And as a rookie, he has 131 other rookies with him this week. And my second pick is another rookie who, Jacob Bridgman, you mentioned him, plus 6,600. You look at some of these names, and yes, like I could pepper, the Lucas Glovers and the Eric Van Royens and all these guys, Patrick Fishburns, that are sitting in the 3s and the 4s. I mean, I could make a whole card of those guys, but we've got to take a chance on some long shots. And as you go further down the board, it's tough to find a guy that's played as consistently as well as Jacob Bridgman has had. And one of the reasons why is that he's a really good putter. He's a top 3 putter in this field. and he's putting the ball in play. He played good at the Sanderson. Again, he's had 3 top 20s in his last 4 starts. Canadian kid that just, again, he's a rookie. He's learning all these golf courses, and he had a good year. Top 25 at both Puerto Rico and Corrales, the same guys he's competing against this week here in Utah. So I like Michael Thorbjornsen. I like Jacob Bridgman. Those are my 2 betting guys this week that I'm passing along to you. Thoughts, reactions, who will win the Ryder Cup? What do you have for me, Len Hochberg?
Speaking of the Ryder Cup, sort of, Mike Weir is in this field, and I had forgotten he's a Utah guy. He not only went to BYU, but he lives apparently in Utah. I didn't think I was surprised to read that he lives in Park City. Maybe he has a second home or something. You would think like the Canadian captain of the International Presidents Cup team should live in Canada, but I don't know. I don't know about their rules and regulations, and Sergio may know more about qualifying status than I did. But Mike Weir is going to be there as well, and and they're going to play up all the Utah guys, and Zach Blair will be there, and there's some others and some high school kids from Utah. So I think that's kind of nice, and it's very, very specific to golf. You don't just bring in Utah guys to play in the tennis tournament in Utah or whatever. And yeah.
Well, talking about, where people live, the last time they held a tour event was 1962 in Utah. So it's been a while, what's that, 62 years? So hey, if you want to roll out the red rocks and carpet for all of them, that's great. But speaking of where people live, I know I speak on behalf of you. You and I text, we talk all the time. And we care about others. We have a lot of fun on the rundown. We may make fun of some people and poke some jibes here and there. I know you're a huge New York sports fan, so you know what the news is that's going on here today with the Jets and everything else. So I got a good laugh when I saw you with your Giants hat on, and you being 3 hours behind didn't even really know how funny that was to me, because I was in Manhattan this morning and all heck was breaking loose on the news and everything. But speaking of all heck breaking loose, and I know you and I both just want to wish everyone down in Florida and everywhere down there in the Southeast, wherever Milton goes, thoughts and prayers to everybody. In all seriousness, we talk about golf for a living, folks, and these poor people are going to they're under siege from these storms, and there's just not much you can do but leave your home and pray. So somebody else might as well pray for you too. And I know Len and I are just 2 people, but he's an award winner, and maybe his prayers, will be answered as well as mine. So we're thinking about everybody in Florida for sure.
I second that, and I do hope the people listen to the authorities, and they are just saying, get out of where you are and get to someplace safe. And that's a horrible position to be in, but it sounds like the best way to go.
Well, on that note, again, Len and I were thinking about you all, and we hope that you're thinking about us too. So join us next week at 11 a.m. on the East Coast. 11:15 a.m. on the East Coast, 8:15 on the West Coast, where Len is out there in LA for the RotoWire Rundown. We'll be covering the Shriners out there in Las Vegas. Thoughts and prayers to Florida, everybody. We'll see you in a week. Len, I'll see you soon.